Well, hello and welcome to Rajat Sabha TV. You're watching discussion today with me, Rajat Kain. Well, amidst continuing border tension between India and China, especially post Galwan clash in June 2020, India recently stated that relationship between the two nations is today truly at a crossroad, and choices made will have profound repercussions not just for the two nations but for the entire world. Union External Affairs Minister S. Jaishanker has outlined 8 broad propositions for stabilizing relationship even while adjusting to changes. Well, these include from adhering to already agreed pacts in entirety, understanding each other better, to managing differences between diverging views of the two nations, for both are civilizational states and must take a long view of their ties. Well, to discuss more on this extremely important issue, we join with a panel of 2 guests. We have Mr. Sushant, Sareen, Strategic Affairs expert. Many thanks for joining us. And former Ambassador S.R. Tayal, sir, many thanks for joining us. Let me start with you, Ambassador Tayal. Given the two countries, given the two neighboring countries, in terms of the history going back a long way, how our ties have been in last, we can say, 7 decades?
We have been neighbors, but there has not been much direct political strategic interaction between India and China because of the heights of Himalayas and, of course, Tibet, which was a free, independent area between India and China. So one would like to say that really there has not been much experience, except in some Buddhist and some cultural matters, of direct dialogue or interaction between India and China. And in the 70 years, of course, the Nehruvian idea was to have some kind of a understanding with China so that the Western powers could be kept out of Asia and
Right.
Asian affairs be settled between India and China and other countries. But that, of course, did not happen, and we all know 1962 and our miscalculations and some wrong decisions regarding Tibet's autonomy and Tibet's sovereignty. We accepted of Chinese sovereignty, etc. But after 62, as External Affairs Minister Jaishankar very clearly and succinctly articulated in his address, after 62, it took almost 1988 when the then Prime Minister went to China. And after that, with very slowly, gradually, relations were brought to some even keel. But why China has decided to upset all that equation, to break peace and tranquility at the LAC,
Right.
that is not clear. And again, that has been consistently, Foreign Minister Jaishankar has been saying that for the last 7-8 months, that why China amassed troops in Galwan or Ladakh, did not withdraw after exercises, and why all this tension. The reasons are not clear, but we are where we are, and he has very clearly articulated the how can we move forward, and he has said relations are under exceptional stress. In diplomatic language, it's a very strong statement,
Right.
and he has laid down the parameters that you cannot have tension, peace, and tranquility in danger at the border, and the rest of the relations can develop. It will not happen. And again, he has warned that Asian century is in danger. India-China relations are at crossroads with profound implications. But again, I would say he has been very measured. All our statements, all official statements coming from anywhere, we are not blaming China too much. We are being very careful, and we are keeping the road open
Right.
for a dialogue and understanding. As Prime Minister Jaishankar last year has said that there is need to have a new equation with China, and that is perhaps what is being sought by South Bloc now.
Right, right. So many thanks for your opening remarks and clearly elucidating on the ties between the two nations. Sushant, Sareen, as Ambassador Tayal also underlined that the address by the Union External Affairs Minister in terms of reworking the framework of ties with China couldn't have been better. Now, how do you see it? Like, given our past of relationship, which is not so hot, not so cold, but there has been a violation from China in last few years, which has certainly gone up, and now reworking relationship within that framework. How do you see that, Sushantji?
So, Rajat, I'll have a slight disagreement with what Ambassador Tayal said, because for us to show some degree of surprise as to why the Chinese have suddenly done what they have done over the last year, when have they not done this? Routinely, every second year, every year, sometimes every second year, but occasionally this kind of inroads have been made, this kind of encroachments have been made by the Chinese. And frankly speaking, we have been lumping it. We make a bit of a song and dance, but then the status quo has already changed. And that's where matters lie until the next time the Chinese move in either an adjoining sector or a completely new sector. And that has been happening for years and years and years now. This, I think, for the first time, there was some kind of a pushback at Doklam. And now, we've suddenly stood firm, in Eastern Ladakh. So something has changed from the Indian side as well in terms of our policy and posture. We have been consistently underplaying it. My second point of disagreement with Ambassador Tayal is on what he says that, we are looking for some kind of a new equation and stuff like that. That has been the fundamental problem. By when we say that, we are not going to say certain things because it might hurt the Chinese, have the Chinese not said similar things without bothering about whether it hurts India or not? And this is precisely what the External Affairs Minister pointed out in his remarks yesterday, when he said that, look, you have to respect our sensitivities as much as you expect us to respect your sensitivities. And he has listed out a number of things in which the Chinese have really, stuffed it to us, whether it was on stapled visas, whether it was on NSG, whether it was on, nominating Pakistani terrorists as terrorists, you name it, on a range of things the Chinese have been, shafting us. And we've been taking it lying down. And I think the time has come to draw certain red lines that we are not going to do this. And there is no point being excessively polite or, constantly being seen to be reaching out to the Chinese that, look, we want very good relations with us. I think the question we need to ask ourselves, Rajat, is we might want good relations with the Chinese. Do the Chinese want good relations with us?
Okay.
And at what
That's fundamental question. Yes,
I think,
yes.
to my mind, is the fundamental question that we need to ask and answer. Because from everything which is available on the ground, it seems that the Chinese don't give a damn about our sentiments, our interests, nothing. They want to have a relationship on their terms. We ask for market access, they promise it and deny it. Another thing which the External Affairs Minister mentioned yesterday. So we might be wanting to have very good relations with the Chinese, but the Chinese clearly don't seem to want an equitable relationship with us. So we have to then ask ourselves that if that is the case, then should we continue seeking, good relations with the Chinese, or should we, try and work around that and do certain other things which help us manage the relationship with China much better than the way we have been doing right now? To go back to the same old template would be, literally doing what Einstein said is insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result each time. I don't think we will get another result if we do the same old policy.
Right. Sushant, Sareen, that's your thought. Let me go to Ambassador Tayal here. Sir, are we really that soft in terms of dealing with China? Do we require some sort of a change in diplomatic doctrine in dealing with China, especially to say, given skirmishes at the LSC that we have seen of late? Ambassador, sir?
I substantially agree with what Sushant has said, except that the scale of intrusions last year and the massing of troops perhaps has been much more than in the past and on various points. So, what was scattered or once in a while at some point of LAC has been a more thought out and concerted kind of an action by China. And that is different from the past. That is one. Second, it is the task of any diplomat to try to expand areas of agreement,
right,
and try to narrow down areas of disagreement. Now, the way the global calculations are changing, you look at our neighbors, China is intruded everywhere. Nepal is in their lap, Sri Lanka, whatever. I need not go in detail. And the statements coming from Russia, from Foreign Minister Lavrov, who has been Foreign Minister of Russia from 2004, he speaks for President Putin. They have been very disturbing. So India has to choose and look at everything very, very carefully. It's a very dynamic situation. It is an ever-changing situation. We cannot take anything for granted, and we, of course, have all the options open. And but I think our establishment, Prime Minister Modi, has not said one word against Xi Jinping, or Xi Jinping has also said anything against Modi. So Prime Minister Modi. So we have to be very clear about our interests. We have to be very clear about our red lines, which have been very nicely and succinctly drawn by Foreign Minister, External Affairs Minister Jaishanker in his yesterday's 8 points. But there is no need to have a very aggressive public articulation and disagreement with China. Many of these things are being done, surely should be done behind closed doors and with full maturity and understanding, and without conceding anywhere on our national interest. So it's a question of approach, of process, and but that, of course, one can have different views without conceding. But again, I would say that Russia is now gradually moving in the Chinese embrace. America under Biden, how it will go, it is
that
because
has to be seen.
the first telephone talk between Biden and President Putin has not been at all good. And the entire democratic establishment blames President Putin and Russia for Hillary Clinton's defeat in 2016 because of the leakage of emails and what is happening to Navalny and all that. Things are very, very wrong between US and Russia. And we have strong dependencies on Russia. And we have to be very careful that we have to manage all these relations. And it requires a lot of thought. And I am very confident that our NSA and Foreign Minister Jaishanker, etc., have that maturity and that understanding. And it is very clear that this is a government which is not going to concede on national interests of importance.
Well, that's pretty well summed up, Ambassador Tayal, that this is the government, or for that matter, any government will not concede in terms of the question of national security or territorial integrity. Sushant, Sareen, like as we were discussing that, when your opinion is that we should recalibrate our diplomatic or to say engagement process with China altogether. We have been too soft, if I may quote you. Now, how important at the same time is it to engage with China given the geographical realities? It is a neighbor, we can't do away with that.
No. So Rajat, it's certainly not my case that we should completely disengage. I think, yes, we should have some kind of economic decoupling. Because clearly that model that, once we have some kind of an economic engagement and a very robust economic engagement, which actually works very well in China's favor, China will be more amenable, more reasonable. Clearly that assumption has failed. We made similar assumptions on our western border with the Pakistanis. And look where it has got us. This
Yeah.
entire nonsense of people-to-people relationship, etc., etc. What is, if anybody does an audit of those policies, you'll realize that they have been dismal failures. So similarly, I think we need to relook at some of the assumptions with which we made our China policy, whether it was on economic engagement, on a range of other issues, and see what have we got in return for those policies. My own assessment is that we've not got very much, right? And all this tom-tomming which we used to do, that look, we have such a great economic relationship. When the Chinese wanted to shaft us, they shafted us without bothering about the economic relationship. So I think we need to look at that. Secondly, in principle, I can't disagree with Ambassador Tayal. When he says that how we need to, what diplomacy is all about. But I think the practice of how we have pursued that principle of engagement with China, to my mind, leaves a lot to be desired. So let's go back to some of the agreements which we signed with the China,
Okay.
or some of the statements which leaders have been making over the years. Right from Mr. Rajiv Gandhi's time to Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, and to some extent even Mr. Modi. So when we look at that part of how we have engaged with the Chinese, clearly, things have not really worked out very well. And the agreements which we have signed, whether it's the Tranquility Agreement and how the mechanisms around the border will operate, clearly those have failed. They have failed because I go back to the first thing which I said. We might want good relations and normal relations with the Chinese. We might want to, have those highfalutin statements like narrow the divergences and expand the convergences. Do the Chinese want it? And that is the fundamental question we need to ask ourselves. So we have to then make our policies on that basis. How do we then balance out what the Chinese power is? How do we prepare our military strength in a way that while not getting into an arms race with the Chinese, because that would be ruinous for us, but we manage to, stop the Chinese in their tracks? How do we tie up with other countries which have similar problems with the Chinese? How do we engage in our neighborhood with the Chinese, as Ambassador Tayal very rightly says, that they made major inroads in our backyard.
Yeah.
Now, part of the problem in our backyard has been that, our diplomacy has been predicated on that we must appear to be the good guys, we must appear to be loved. I have no problems in wanting to be loved in the neighborhood, but there must also be a sense of dread when it comes to India. That look, if you do something which is really going to go against India's interest, you are going to, do something which harms India's national security and stuff like that, that there will be consequences. So I am of that view that yes, we must, follow that Gujarat doctrine of not seeking reciprocity in the region, going out of our way to our neighbors, as indeed we are doing with the vaccine diplomacy right now. And we've really outsmarted and outpaced the Chinese on that, because the Chinese were being greedy, they were being mean, they were being all sorts of things which Chinese are famous for. They were being exploitative when they were demanding, all sorts of concessions and all sorts of monies from countries in our neighborhood, while we showed a large heart and were supplying them with the vaccines. So clearly we stole a march over them. Now, I'm all for that kind of a policy. But at the same time, if somebody does something which is going to harm my national security in ways which is intolerable for me, then I'm afraid that there will have to be consequences. So I would love to be loved, but I would also not mind being a little feared.
Right. Well, that's certainly, well summarized, Sushant, Sareen. Ambassador Tayal, now in your the first reply that we were discussing, you said that you underlined it how it took a long time between the two countries to have a prime ministerial visit after 1962 war. That is 26 years. 1988, we had a visit between the two prime ministers. Now, given the history of India and China, so whenever there has been tension, it has taken some bit of a long time for that to get back on the track. Vis-a-vis that, do we understand Chinese in a way inside out to conclude, yes, even Chinese want better relationships or better ties with India?
No, there is no evidence of that. And we have to go back to the drawing board, as Sushantji is saying. All the past agreements, equations, understandings are now up in the smoke.
Okay.
And we have to also realize what China is. European Union has had an agreement with China on investment. Japan's prime minister has changed, and the new prime minister has made some statements. So we have to be very, very careful. We have our national interests, but we have to very carefully see how other countries are looking at China, and we are trying to expand our reach, whether it is Quad, whether it is building roads. So government is taking steps to strengthen our own strength to resist Chinese incursions. Of course, economic disengagement is taking place, and I see no expectation that it will be reversed on productivity linked the new production on APIs, etc. So government is now ultimately, earlier they were only talking about these things. For the last decade, I am hearing that this should be done. But now we have been pushed into doing something. All that is for the good. It will be a long haul. I do not see any resolution of this issue in near future, and we should all be prepared. What do we want, and the country should be ready to pay price for it, because there will be an economic price. If there is deployment of 50,000 troops on LSE, there will be a implication for the budget. So the people of India must be very clear and stand with the government if there is some economic pain.
Well, on that point, we wrap up the show. Many thanks, Ambassador Tayal. Many thanks, Sushant, Sareen, for joining us and elucidating on this extremely important issue. Of course, we started off with dissecting Union External Affairs Minister's statement, and then, of course, like exploring the dimensions of history between India and China, of course, and what lies ahead. Many thanks, Ambassador Tayal. Many thanks, Sushant, Sareen. So there we have. So this brings to an end of this edition of Discussion today. Keep watching RSTV for more. Thank you and goodbye.